Hello? Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to Servitization Live. My name's Tim Baines, and I'll be leading you through the proceedings for today. I'd just like to start by reminding you of the program that we're following with Servitization Live. Yesterday, we focused on industry as a service, and what we did was take a global roundup of how servitization has been adopted in different regions of the world. Today, we are going to take a deep dive into two particular areas. We're going to look at climate change, three areas. We're going to look at climate change, aging, and food security, and how servitization as a business model for manufacturers can help in a response to each of those global challenges. Tomorrow, we're going to focus more upon small businesses and to demonstrate how servitization can be applied in smaller businesses. But today is very much focused at this idea that servitization has something to say against all the megatrends which are shaping society globally. Just a reminder, there's two ways which we would encourage you to take part in the event. First of all, for those people in the room, if we could ask you, when we get to the Q&A sections, if you could put your hand up, wait, we'll bring a microphone over to you, then just say your name and organisation, and then pose your question to the speaker. For those people who are online, if we could encourage you to type your questions into the chat box, then during the Q&A session, we'll invite you to come and actually pose your question to the speakers if we can. If there's a problem with your video or a problem with your camera, then what we will do is we'll pose the question on your behalf. The first of the topics that we're going to look at today is healthy living and aging as a service. And this is very much about how servitization and the business model of outcome-based contracts can help manufacturers to help society to respond to the challenges of an aged society. And what we're going to do is we're going to start the session by doing a deep dive into the issues which we are faced with in that particular challenge. So I'm delighted to be joined by my colleague James Brown from Aston University. James is going to join us. He's going to take us through the biological challenges of aging, or what it actually means to us and what the challenges are. And then we will move on to a series of presentations, which will be all about how the manufacturers are responding to those challenges using outcome-based business models. So, James, over to you.
Thanks, Tim. Okay, so morning everybody. As Tim said, I'm Dr. James Brown. I'm the Deputy Director of the Aston Research Centre for Healthy Ageing, and I've worked in the field of the biology of ageing now for the last 10 or 12 years. So my talk is entitled An Ageing World, the Challenge of Living Longer and Why It Matters, and hopefully at the end of this talk you'll have a better understanding of both the challenge and the opportunities that an ageing society present to society more widely, but also to business. So here you can see an image of the apocryphal Fountain of Youth. And what this tells you is that we've been fascinated with aging for a long time. Now, interestingly, if you look at the left of this picture, you can see people who are arriving on horseback, and therefore they're wealthy, but also people being carried by their younger relatives. We are not that far away from a pharmaceutical fountain of youth. There are drugs being tested in clinical trials at the minute, which are anti-aging. And what I find interesting is that in the future, it will probably only be those that are wealthy enough to afford those drugs that will be able to stave off or avoid what happens to us as we age. So the first thing is kind of why do we age, and is it universal? Well, aging effectively is the loss of normal function, physical function, as time passes. When you're young, you can run after a bus, you can have an injury or an operation or an illness and recover quite quickly. But the older we get, the less able we are to do that, and that provides challenges to individuals and their families. But interesting, aging isn't necessarily universal. There's a list of organisms on this page which are so long-lived, they may as well be immortal. And at the bottom you can see in bold Arctica islandica, the quahog clam, which is the poster child for the biology of aging research. This is the oldest known living organism, and the oldest example of this was aged at 507 years old. The reason we know this, and this is a typical biologist answer to everything, is somebody killed it and counted the number of rings on its shell to work out how old it was, therefore killing the oldest animal alive on the planet. And it's thought to be one of 7 organisms that don't age at all. So actually aging may not be universal. It may be something that is part of a human experience, but not necessarily across biology. There's a database called the ANAGE database where you can search for these organisms. So what we do know, and this is a great success of medicine and social care and sanitation and other things, is that we're living longer. So by 2030, a quarter of the world's population will be over what we used to call pensionable age, or 65 years of age. And in the UK alone, by 2030 also, we'll have more than 5 million people who are in deep old age, so over the age of 80. So on average, we are living longer, and that's a wonderful thing. I'm sure those of you that have older relatives who are still with us will agree that's a wonderful thing. The important side effect to this is that although we're living longer, we're spending proportionally fewer of those years in good health. So life expectancy is extended, but health expectancy is shorter. And you can see some values on the screen here. So males can expect just under 63 years of healthy life out of their 79.2 years on average expected life, and females just over 63 years out of just under 83 years. And the problem is that these years of poor health are concentrated at the end of life. So we have an extended period of time, those extra years that we're getting, we're spending in poor health. And importantly, we're moving ever closer to a dependency ratio of 1-to-1. So that's one person in work for every person who is, if you like, retired and claiming benefits from the state. And this is clearly unsustainable. I'm going to talk very quickly about frailty. If we think about those people towards the end of life that therefore are having multiple morbidities or disease states, age-related issues like Alzheimer's, cardiovascular disease, osteoarthritis, etc., we know that multiple conditions can lead to a clinical syndrome which we call frailty. And frailty is effectively a collection of issues that lead to an individual being more likely to have falls, to have disabilities, and to become dependent. It's a long-term condition. It is reversible with the right intervention in some people, and it's a big problem. However, as you can see on the right-hand side of this slide, it's not inevitable. So at the minute, probably about 30% of people over 80 are classed as frail and therefore have significant needs in terms of either maintaining dependence or in terms of providing care. It's also not untreatable. We know that if you put in structured physical activity interventions with a multidisciplinary team, you can manage or even reverse frailty in the earliest stages. What living with frailty means to a person is effectively your functional ability is decreased, and that means that when you are challenged by something that a younger person would cope with very easily, so that's an operation, a period of bed rest, a fall, an illness, and COVID has been a really bold example of this. You can see from the graph here that when a stressor is applied, you can see that we can easily move into dependence from independence if an individual is starting at a lower point of biological robustness. And therefore, people who are frail can, what we say, fall onto the stairway of dependence. So repeated events of bed rest or injuries or falls or illnesses can lead an individual from being independent, contributing to society, to being dependent and needing the provision of care, technology and services to help them. Why does frailty happen? We don't really know. It's partly in your genetics. So we know that there are genes which can predict your likelihood to age unsuccessfully, which is effectively what frailty is. We also know that actually what happened to your parents and your parents' parents, weirdly, has an impact because we have something called epigenetics, which is chemical modification of DNA. So if your parents went through a particularly stressful period, such as a world war, we know that can have an impact on the risk of you becoming frail and aging unsuccessfully. But the most important factors are lifestyle. We in the Western world have particularly poor lifestyles where we're too sedentary, we don't get enough physical activity or exercise, and our diets are not great. And these factors collectively can lead to frailty being more common. You can see some information here about comorbidities are important, but actually 25% of people with frailty have no chronic disease. And equally, we often think of frail older adults as being underweight, but actually up to 30% of frailty is seen in obese older adults. So there are lots of different factors at play here. What can we do about it? Well, there's lots we can do about it, and this is where businesses, as well as the NHS, can provide products and services to support healthy aging or to support individuals who are not aging well to still maintain independence. Often this involves kind of an interdisciplinary approach using technology, using the healthcare system, using social interaction to make sure that people can effectively maintain independence for as long as possible. The earlier that we put these types of products and services and interactions in place, the better, because we can reverse frailty. And effectively, one of the problems that we have, though, is predicting those individuals that A, will become frail, or B, will respond to the type of interventions that can allow people to age more healthily and not become dependent. So that was really a whistle-stop tour around aging. The future of aging is clearly important. If we are living longer and we're spending those years in poor health, this has a significant impact on individuals. It has a significant impact on their families, on society, and on the exchequer, because we're going to spend more and more money maintaining people in a state of frailty for longer. So more drugs, more interactions with their doctor, more interactions with the hospital, which costs a lot of money. How can we try and prevent that? What can we do to try and make sure that everybody has the opportunity to age more healthily? So the first thing I'll say is that aging is a moving target. We have seen over the last 10 years changes in life expectancy, which at first were thought to be a product of austerity. So we saw for the first time in nearly 100 years a plateauing and even maybe a slight dip in life expectancy in and around 2010. And importantly, we know that whilst we have this massive global population aging occurring, it doesn't happen equally. So there are people in this room who are aging differently to other people in this room, and there are people watching online who are aging differently to other people watching online. And it's difficult, therefore, to try and predict who is going to need help and to have an array of products and services which can therefore support people's journey as they age. Now, obviously, adults, as I've said, generally spend their later years in poor health. And one of the issues we have when it comes to businesses who work with older adults, providing products and services, is they often make two mistakes. The first is they don't talk to older adults about their products and services. So they don't actually get the viewpoint of an older adult in what would I accept in my house as a product or a service, or what level of interaction would I be comfortable with a piece of technology. And the second mistake that businesses often make is they do talk to older adults. And the reason that's a mistake sometimes is that if you consider the older adult generation now and their interaction with products and services, it's very different to the generation coming after them. I include myself in that generation as a 46-year-old man, but I am used to using services such as Google, Facebook, Apple on a day-to-day basis. So many businesses actually, when they do talk to older adults to try and design their products and services, they're not thinking 10 or 20 years in the future. They're thinking about the population they're working with now. Whereas actually, as part of that conversation, as part of that process of identifying what the future products and services need to be, you also need to be talking to slightly younger people who may be more conversant with the types of services which are already available in other sectors. The whole concept of aging poorly provides a significant challenge for healthcare systems. We know that about 65% of beds in hospitals are taken up by people over the age of 65. Something like 80% of interactions with GPs are taken up by older adults. So the way in which our healthcare system interacts with older adults is heavily skewed towards people who are living those extra years, but living them in poor health. And therefore, there is a huge opportunity for businesses that can help support the health of older adults to intervene before those types of interactions are needed, to stop people from being admitted to hospital, or if they're discharged, to provide a service that means they don't get readmitted within 28 days, which is very common. Just a quick study we ran 2 years ago where we used a simple phone call to follow up older adults who were discharged from hospital. And that phone call, checking in of how they were, did they have their meds, did they have any pain, how did they feel? That phone call led to a 50% reduction in hospital readmission. So it shows you that actually providing sometimes very simple services can have a profound impact on the health of older adults, but also the systems that are in place for supporting health in general. Therefore, technologies and services in particular are a very important tool as we go forward into a future where theoretically, unless there is a once-in-a-generation pharmaceutical fountain of youth that's developed, we aren't going to see massive changes in the projections of what's going to happen with aging. We'll see slow increases in longevity and slow decreases in health span over the next probably 5, 10, 15, 20 years, unless we have that once-in-a-generation discovery. So there's a huge opportunity for a growing demographic of the population to provide the types of services that will maintain independence, health, and well-being in older adults. The important element of this is particularly with older adults, that at the minute, many of the products and services which we use are around detection, not prediction, and therefore we need a step change in the services we provide, because whilst it's wonderful to be able to predict to detect when something's happened, so to detect a fall, to use a GPS tracker to see that somebody's actually with dementia has walked away from their house, it's better to be able to predict when something's going to happen and then put an intervention in place to stop that. And that's where services can play a big part. So one of the big issues, one of the big barriers to this happening, again, is the fact that actually there's a very small evidence base for how technology-based services can actually do this. And we need a step change in how we approach the role of technology and technological services in older adults, from detecting changes to predicting changes. And part of the problem, speaking as somebody who works at a university, is that actually there are very few UK-based studies and very little research going on that brings together academia and industrial partners to evaluate how services can start to do this. How can we start to predict when somebody is going to have a fall? How can we start to predict when somebody is going to stop eating as much, or that somebody is using the toilet more and therefore has issues with their prostate, for example? There are funds out there for businesses to work with universities to do this, but we aren't making the best use of these at the minute. Importantly, and this is one of my final points, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, that aging is not kind of universally the same for everybody. And the example I always use for this is the Glasgow train journey. So if you take a train from the centre of Glasgow out to the leafy suburbs, life expectancy for males increases by 30 years from the centre of Glasgow to the leafy suburbs. And that gives you an indication, actually, that one of the biggest potentially modifiable predictors of aging is deprivation and poverty. And we know that individuals who live in deprivation have significantly worse aging outcomes than those that do not live in deprivation. And therefore, there's an argument that one of the biggest things we can do to try and support healthy aging is to try and assist people to make that move from living in a deprived environment or a deprived lifestyle into a less deprived one. This is incredibly important because it's not really the focus of government, successive governments, to do this, and yet as taxpayers we are picking up the tab of not dealing with this issue. So we are picking up the NHS bill of £130 billion a year, the vast majority of which is being spent on dealing with issues associated with poor aging. So actually understanding the fact that aging is different in between individuals, that the target market for unsuccessful aging equally may not be able to afford services and products that can assist their aging because they may be living in deprivation. Therefore, getting on board local authorities, NHS organisations to engage with products and services which can assist healthy aging often requires an evidence base. Because if you go to a local authority and say, we've got this wonderful service which we think is going to save you money because we think it can predict when somebody's going to have a fall, the first thing they'll say is, where's your evidence? And unless you've got that evidence and you've got some element of cost-benefit analysis, a local authority or an NHS, a CCG or whatever they're going to change into soon, absolutely won't invest in it. because they don't have the money to invest in it. Whereas if you have an evidence base that says this service is going to have an absolutely pivotal impact on somebody's levels of dependence or engagement with the NHS, they're more likely to buy that service, engage with that service, or use that service. It's the same with families. If, as in many services with older adults, it's the families of older adults that actually engage with the provider of that service, you need evidence that it's going to be beneficial to their father, mother, grandfather, grandmother, because otherwise they're going to have to make the tough decision of, well, do I spend this money on every month on whatever that service is, not really knowing that I'm going to get a benefit for this, or do I just cast money into the void hoping that it works? Services are a key part, therefore, of the future of aging. Effectively, providing types of services which can maintain dependence, which can maintain social interaction, which can maintain health, well-being, physical activity, a good diet, are absolutely necessary for us to work with older adults and ensure that everybody gets the opportunity to age more healthily in the future. And we currently don't have an environment, particularly not a B2C environment, where individuals can easily access services which will allow them to do this. And this, as I've said earlier, is partly driven by a lack of evidence. As an emerging business that may be using machine learning to predict from information gained from sensors whether somebody's going to have a fall, you're going to have that evidence in order to make people confident that when they subscribe to this service or buy this service, it's going to be effective. And that's where ensuring that you have evidence is a key part of providing services to older adults. And again, the main element for this, for me as somebody who works with older adults, is about that step change in what services provide in terms of, is it response or is it prediction? We already have lots of products and some services which are aimed at responding to issues in older adults, and they're incredibly helpful and useful. But as an industry, as a sector, particularly assisted living technology, needs to start to move quickly and strongly into prediction. Being able to say to somebody, we've looked at your data and your gait has changed slightly, therefore you're at a 30% increased risk of a fall in the next 2 weeks. We need you to see a healthcare professional to get this assessed. Or we've noticed you're going to the toilet 3 or 4 times during the night. This is a falls risk, and therefore we're going to put an interaction in where we'll look at your bladder health and make sure there aren't any lower urinary tract issues that are causing you to do that. As I've said, providing evidence of cost and benefit for local authorities and CCGs is essential, and that is a difficult thing to do unless you are either willing to invest your own money as a business or have academic contacts so you can access schemes like Innovate UK and UK RI schemes. But those schemes are there, and believe me, those academic partners are there as well. It's also important to remember end users, but also their families. As I've said, end users will tell you about what they want as a service, as an older adult, but that's not going to inform you about the services you'll need in 10 years or 20 years. So you have to have an eye on the future, because aging is a moving target. People like myself, people slightly older than me, who have a different relationship with the NHS, with technology, with services, are going to be slightly different older adults than the population we have at the minute. So having an eye on the future as aging changes is really important. Equally, having an eye on the big players is important as well. So I have a watch made by a company named after a type of fruit, and if you're over the age of 65 and have one of these watches, it automatically has a falls detector in it, and it automatically, should you fall, detects it and sends a signal, or at least offers you the opportunity to send a signal to emergency services. And the big players, the Googles, the Apples, the Facebooks, for example, have already been doing lots of research, because they can afford to fund it themselves, on services that can predict these issues for older adults. So as we age, the people that engage with those big 3 or 4 companies, because they're used to it, are more likely to engage with those services in the future. So it's important to recognise, I suppose, that the playing field when it comes to supporting healthy living in older adults is slightly stacked towards those companies who there's an existing relationship with younger people. So for me, the key take-home messages are that aging is pretty much universal, but we don't all age the same, not at the same rate. And equally, some of us will maintain our health in older age and live for a long time, whilst others don't. Unsuccessful aging, and frailty is a really good clinical syndrome to describe unsuccessful aging, is a huge challenge to individuals, families, and society. We know that demographic changes mean we're likely to see increased numbers of older adults in the future, but those older adults are likely to be in poor health, and that those with the worst health are also going to be the most deprived, which is, again, an opportunity and a challenge for business and for the NHS. We need more robust data to enable us to say with confidence whether we can improve the lives of older adults using technology, and particularly services focused around technology. And that is such a huge opportunity for the sector. It really needs to be grasped. And finally, services will be a key element of maintaining independence in older adults. To get universal uptake, particularly by those funding bodies like local authorities or CCGs, we need better evidence of effectiveness and cost effectiveness. Thank you very much.
James, that was excellent, relevant to us all, and lots of opportunities for services. So we have a time to take a few questions. Any questions from anybody in the room?
James, excellent presentation, thank you. You talked a lot there about healthcare professionals and the need to have that universal uptake. Are you able to say anything on the role of social services in terms of their ability to engage and also to help with that prediction?
It's a really important question. So obviously we have had successive governments who have said, we're going to grasp the nettle of social care and combining health and social care, but really paying lip service to it. Clearly, most of the services that are provided to older adults are social care rather than NHS, which is why I mentioned local authorities. And that can be providing care in the home, it can be providing housing, it can be providing a care home. What we know is that, again, there is pretty patchwork coverage of the availability of social care to older adults. So I live in Sandwell, and I know that about 2 years ago, I did a television programme with ITV about the availability of social housing for older adults in Sandwell. And for the Metropolitan Borough of Sandwell, there were 18 social houses available to any older adult on their website, 18. And if you imagine there's probably in Sandwell going to be at least tens of thousands of older adults that might need some element of support with their housing, clearly the provision isn't there. And we know over the last 30 years, the level of social housing as one marker of social care has not risen in 30 years. And this is all down to funding. And this is why providing services that can keep an older adult independent in their own home are absolutely key to solving this problem. Because if you can provide a service which means that somebody lives independently, happily and healthily in their own home for as long as possible before they require care, then you can take the pressure off a social care system which clearly at the minute isn't really fit for purpose. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further questions, ladies and gentlemen?
Thank you. You mentioned that one mistake when designing products and services is not talking to the users, another is talking to the wrong ones. What is the way forward? Is it talking to talking to some users? Is it all data driven, or is there something else?
It depends what the question is. So first of all, adoption of particularly technology-based services is only going to occur if those services fit in with the lifestyle of the older adults as they are now. So for example, if you have a service which is incredible at predicting if somebody is going to have a fall, but it involves a lot of interaction, then the possibility exists that many older adults won't want to interact with whatever technology is part of that service because they're unable to, because it confuses them, because they forget to. And therefore, speaking to older adults, getting their opinions through surveys and focus groups and pieces of research to understand what level of interaction they would be willing to engage with and able to engage with is important. But, as I said, if you then forward, if your 5 or 10 year plan is based on that data, and you're not thinking about the generation that follow, who are much more au fait with using technology, with interacting with technology, then you'll end up with a product or a service that may not be necessarily appropriate for the generation that follows. So you have to have an eye on the group you're providing a service to, but equally the group that's going to follow, who will have a different set of skills and requirements for any service that will help them maintain healthy aging.
Thank you, James. Anybody online? Questions online, please? Rakshit?
Thanks, Tim. We do have a very interesting question for you, James. Sort of a long one, so I'll pose it to you. Long-term service contracts and cross-generations could save lives and preserve health through prediction and prevention. This makes perfect sense. So why do you think the NHS or other health providers don't do this already and are reactive instead?
That's a good question. There's so much wrong with the way in which the NHS, local authorities and other, whether they're local or national organisations, interact with services and interact with providers of services. This could be a talk in its own right. Clearly, a lot of this comes down to cost and comes down to what is affordable at a time. And therefore, because we have in successive governments seen successive top-down reorganisations of the NHS, because we've seen changes in how the NHS is funded, changes in how we structure the use of private services, for example, we've not had, at any point in the last 25 years, a period of genuine stability. And equally, anybody that has a business that provides services to government, whether it's local or national, will understand that in many cases, the idea of spending now to accumulate in the future just doesn't fit onto their radar at all. Whereas actually we know that if you invest in the types of services and technologies and treatments and other issues that can help older adults when people are, for example, in middle age, you will have huge benefits in 20 to 30 years. But explaining that to a government minister or a commissioner from a CCG, it'll be white noise. They just won't hear it.
Thank you, James. Any further questions?
Yeah, we have one more question from Neil. Another very interesting one. Where would you invest now for your own future, and where would you invest now for the future of your children in the context of healthy aging?
It's a really good question, because aging, as I said, actually doesn't just start when you're my age, 45. Aging starts possibly even before you're born. And really, in terms of investing in aging, we should be doing this from an educational point during school. We should be properly educating children about food understanding, about exercise. We should have systems in place that mean that we don't, for example, use time wasting and time saving technologies all the time. If you look at physical activity and energy expenditure over the last 100 years, the development of the personal computer, the mobile phone, the Xbox, all these things mean we spend more time sitting down and not moving. And actually, one of the biggest predictors of how successfully we'll age is how physically active you are. And therefore, there is a huge argument, it's a great question, that we should be investing in people's health in general at a very young age, because if people are healthy and adopt healthy lifestyles, they will age better. But again, it's about having 360-degree agreement on this from government, from businesses, and from society that these are activities they need to engage with.
James, that was an excellent talk. Thank you very much. Made me very nervous, but thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
So with some trepidation, I'm going to carry on this theme of us exploring the challenges and opportunities for services in this space. And we've got our second keynote of the morning, and that's going to be Graham Armitage from EIT Health in Ireland. I will just check that, Graham, can you hear me?
I can.
Graham, welcome. When you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much indeed. I can't tell whether I've got the slides up there. Right, that's better. Great. So thank you very much indeed. I'm Graham Armitage. I'm the Partnership Development Lead for EIT Health Ireland UK. I previously worked as the innovation lead for ageing and health at Newcastle University, but now my role is to support the Ireland and UK elements of EIT Health's 150 plus partner organisations across Europe to innovate in the health space. EIT Health supports innovation by bringing together research, business, healthcare organisations and education, and use that to drive new products and services and support strategic change. And 15 years ago, in a completely different life, I worked with the MOD when it was beginning to move its procurement emphasis from equipment to services and serviced equipment. And now we're seeing the same beginning to happen in healthcare in all over the world. And that's why I'm here speaking with you today. So innovation is often thought as synonymous with technology, and though I wouldn't necessarily agree with that, health is no different, and innovation attempts have traditionally been driven by technology, although not always with a clear understanding of the need that technology is needed to address. Nevertheless, new technologies in imaging, diagnostics, robotics, monitoring and control systems, even the adoption of good old-fashioned and pretty bog-standard IT into the health environment have delivered fabulous new capabilities to preserve life and restore function. But these kind of piecemeal increments in capability, while they've undoubtedly extended what doctors can do, they've often failed to replace existing tools and techniques, and that's created duplication and increased cost. And that increased cost is a major driver for increasing cost in healthcare overall. We need a more integrated approach. But innovation isn't the only factor technology isn't the only factor driving innovation. Innovation is also driven by changes in the environment. And thank you, James, for a very good discussion there about aging, which is often promoted as the major driver of healthcare cost growth. While some of that is true, the real impact on healthcare of growing numbers of older people, as James has spoken about, comes from changing needs in the health system, dramatically changing the nature of healthcare from an acute service providing short time-bound interventions to cure people or to save their lives, into the management of long-term conditions and maximizing the quality of life. A completely different sort of health service, if you like. As James described, chronic conditions associated with older age accumulate in multimorbidity and frailty, creating a complex and varied mixture of needs. Different diseases dominate at different times and in different people, and these two issues combine to create a huge variety of presentation requiring different management and treatment. As a result, these diseases are also progressive at different rates, creating change with time. And as a result, we need more options to deal with different presentations and choices. It's difficult, this higher variety is difficult to deal with in large, highly structured healthcare systems. And that means there are opportunities for small SMEs, for charities, and even for national and international offers where they can gain scale by expanding the geography to which they're relevant, while still remaining a relatively specialized service provider. But these solutions need to be flexible. They need to be able to identify and react to change. Change in the status of the individual, but also, I think, as James has indicated, change in the cohorts as they move through. People have different preferences in the way they behave, and different changes in their lives and changes in the way that they can operate within their lives mean that they will make different choices in how they interact with these services. These solutions also need to recognize that not all patients will be comfortable or equipped to engage directly with technology, as James discussed. So technology solutions may need to be wrapped in elements of support as a service if they're to be acceptable and usable. Of course, if we're going to live long lives, it pays to look after ourselves. And again, as James mentioned, there have been huge growth in preventative health offers, including those from mainstream IT providers like the fruit-based computer giant that was mentioned. Like these things like these smart watches, they use data about our behavior. They often gamify it and use guidance and support to shape our behavior to better our health, which is really great. But the complex data would be really difficult for even health professionals to engage with directly, let alone the layman. And so since we can't engage directly with it to make our own decisions, they only become usable and more effective when delivered with an element of servitization. Of course, policy is also changing the environment. Health policy internationally is moving away from the big hospital and towards the delivery of care closer to home in the community, where and when we need it. This means opportunities for more locally based solutions, meeting specific geographical needs mixes. But they are isolated in many ways from other services. Or they're embedded in non-health specific services like social care, as was discussed before. So without that established system or process in which to embed tools, the solutions may well need to be designed as a service if they're to be successful. Policies also recognizing the fact that in the modern world, we're not perhaps as obedient to clinical authority as we might have been in the past, and we expect our healthcare to be delivered respecting our own choices and needs and moving away from the one-size-fits-all towards personalised medicine and personalised offerings. So this again offers opportunities for offers to be created almost as menu items within a larger system. But these can only work if they can engage with and shape the systems in which they're presented, if they can capture their own data, process it and use it to feed back to change itself and the surrounding system. Again, a level of service is needed. I don't think anyone would ever claim that healthcare was an easy space to innovate. There are a huge number of barriers. The procurement system is complex and much more fragmented than anyone would ever like to admit. It's also very focused on buying bits of kit, as that's the traditional way that we've operated, although that is beginning to change. The procurement systems, the procurement organizations change regularly, as James hinted at there. We're about to go through yet another change in the way that healthcare is procured and funded and paid for in the UK. But this internationally is a challenge with everybody using different methods, different processes. The acceptability of solutions is important and very highly dependent on clinical opinion. So we need to take with us when we're providing or we're proposing solutions, we need to take with us key opinion leaders beyond individual clinicians. Clinicians themselves come up with all sorts of fabulous solutions, but often struggle to get them beyond their own clinic, let alone into the wider healthcare system or into broader healthcare across the world. So the easiest way to achieve this is if we can enroll respected, knowledgeable and relevant clinicians who can spread that opinion and understanding of the product and offer that we're creating to others. But again, as James mentioned, solutions must also be acceptable to the patient. James spoke about the importance of involving older people and also the difficulty of involving the right people, because we have to involve not necessarily the people that are suffering with the challenges now, but the people who we will be treating in 5, 10, 15 years time when we eventually manage to bring our solution to the marketplace. And so we must work with people to understand how they want to live their lives, how they want to live with the condition that we're dealing with, their own aspirations personally, so that they will comply with what's offered to them. They will use the tools and opportunities that we have, and the effectiveness of our offer will be increased. Health is quite rightly a highly regulated industry. And it's very, very evidence-based. This often means that we have to go through expensive clinical trials to prove that our piece of kit works, or to prove that our service is capable of working. This can only be achieved through successful engagement with existing healthcare organisations and academic institutions, and in a very structured and supported fashion if we're going to meet the sometimes changing requirements of regulatory organisations. There are a lot of accelerators in healthcare now, including EIT Health, who actually specialise in making this possible. And making it possible to both identify the needs that we want to address, to validate those needs, to validate the opportunity of a business model around those needs, and then to gather evidence subsequently of our solution at work to make sure that we can show procurers that we can deliver what they need in response to their paying us, hopefully, large sums of money. So all of this represents some huge opportunities. One of the things that was mentioned before, very briefly, was this idea of value-based healthcare. Value-based healthcare is a relatively new idea. It's coming from the States, and but it's also relevant in Europe and elsewhere in the world. And what it's choosing to do is to focus on outcomes and to pay for outcomes, or to seek to pay for outcomes. And it's important that those outcomes are not just clinical outcomes, but are life outcomes, because of the changes that we've talked about in health resulting from various challenges like aging. We need to make sure that the patients appreciate the healthcare that they're given because it fits with their lives and they can live with it and work with it, and they can maximize the value from it. Value-based healthcare involves working in partnership. It involves sharing risk. It involves capturing data and using feedback to modify the way that we deliver services as we go, to make sure that rather than being bound to deliver something by a contract, we are delivering always to the best benefit of the system and to the patient, and that the payment that we get reflects our success in doing so. So this, again, needs us to work closely with these existing processes and with key opinion leaders. And the opportunity to work with accelerators and with other organizations that are designed to help us to do this shouldn't be underestimated. And anybody who is establishing a new business in the healthcare space, this is really important to think about. If you're going to do this sort of value-based healthcare and deliver these value-based services, then you really have to commit to attending to what your outcomes are, the impact you're making, to working with the commissioners to share the risk of delivering the service. You may not be able to deliver all of it yourself anyway. You probably need the interaction of clinicians to support you. And so there is risk on both sides, there is input on both sides, and working closely together between the service provider and the host healthcare organization, if you like, becomes incredibly important in the success of this sort of model of healthcare. But it's also important to get things like the contracting right, things that are often forgotten about perhaps in healthcare, where we're concentrating on the safety for the patient, the effectiveness of the treatment. We sometimes forget that it's equally important to make sure that the right behaviors are incentivized by our commissioning and our payment and our contracting arrangements. And very often in the past, this has been an area of failure because we have tended to create situations where there are perverse incentives. It would be sensible for the chief executive of a large hospital organization to be wandering around with a baseball bat breaking people's knees because he's paid to fix people. He's not paid to make sure they stay healthy. So the system needs modification and change, and is changing slowly to accommodate these sorts of approaches. So we have an opportunity to move from a situation where we're providing a tool which is going to be used by somebody else in a very remote fashion with no real follow-up or responsibility from us, to being a real part of delivering successful healthcare, either by providing a standalone service or by working in partnership, providing a shared service with a larger, more established healthcare organization. We're beginning to see this emerging in various areas around the industry. We've talked about the computer giants and their smartwatches and their health devices, which often operate in the personal health space, the preventative space, and don't have to interact too much with the real healthcare delivery systems and the health controlled data sets. But it's also happening elsewhere. Pharma, for example, with the struggles that they have with their existing business models, are trying to move towards systems where they provide the drug, but they also provide the delivery system of that drug. They monitor the compliance with the use of that drug, and they are accepting a degree of responsibility for the outcomes of using that drug. By doing so, they can help to reduce waste, they can help to drive down costs and lost cost in the system, improve the effectiveness of what they're delivering, and they can charge a premium as a result. So is this relevant for smaller businesses? I'm sure you're asking yourself, and I would say yes, and I would speak of an example. So in my previous role, I was involved with a business called Changing Health. Changing Health really began as an academic exploration of what you could do with movement as a treatment, as an intervention in healthcare. It used smartwatches, accelerometers, etc., to monitor that movement. It could have been a business that created monitors. It wouldn't have done very well because a lot of people are doing that now, and all these smartwatches have these monitors built into them already. But actually, the investigation went further, and it built an understanding of how doctors and clinicians would engage with people who were doing engaging in these sorts of treatments, and the support that those people would need to deliver successful outcomes as a result of engaging with that equipment. The business has moved on. It's a diabetes support business now, which is where it originated from, and it uses exercise to drive back type 2 diabetes and help people to regain health through the use of exercise. And it has national contracts, and it also works internationally with insurance companies, because it has built this service which helps to inform healthcare providers, healthcare professionals, how to engage with the patients who are involved in this treatment. It provides the monitoring and feedback to the patient about how they're doing, and it provides support and guidance through coaches to help people to engage with the mechanism. All that together is wrapped up as a service which can be sold to, for instance, the NHS, and has successfully been sold to the NHS, to deliver greatly improved outcomes for people with diabetes. So I hope that example convinces you that this is not just something for big business, but is also something that SMEs can grow into and can develop for themselves. So thank you very much for listening, and I'm ready to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Graham. I'd like to start with the first question. I was just writing it down as you actually concluded your presentation. So if I may, I was quite keen to understand more about this last example that you actually gave, where the manufacturer was, the service provider was getting involved with with contracting for these outcomes. Is there really a growing appetite, a growing acceptance that manufacturers or technology providers can actually contract for outcomes, not just contribute towards delivering outcomes, but actually contract for outcomes? Are we at that level?
I think it's in many cases it's more aspirational, and we're moving towards it rather than being there. I think value-based healthcare has had its teething problems as a concept, and that's partly because of the challenges around contracting for this sort of activity. But we're definitely seeing some movement in the right direction. We're definitely seeing a willingness in some organisations to take those steps towards outcomes-based frameworks for payment. Going to a true outcome base is probably a huge step from where we are now, and so the process is perhaps rather more iterative than maybe I spoke about directly there, with people moving towards it in maybe in baby steps over different contracts. But it does require, as a previous questioner mentioned, it does require a longer term view, and it can be very difficult to establish in situations where people are only talking about very short contract periods. So it needs a relationship to be built between provider and commissioner, which some see as kind of non-competitive, and can be challenging. So there's a lot of work to be done, and close work to be done between potential providers and commissioners if this is ever to come about.
Thank you. And if I may, just to follow up on that slightly, anecdotally, conversations I've had with people in the healthcare sector, if we talk about contracting out for outcomes, servitization, sometimes people will turn around to me and say, we've had PFI initiatives, and liken what I'm talking about to those PFI initiatives and some of the problems which have been associated with them. Is there a legacy of perhaps reluctance to get involved with some of these outcome-based contracts because of PFI, or have I misread that situation?
I think you're almost certainly right. I think the NHS is a particularly difficult, perhaps, space in which to do some of this, because we are naturally very protective of our NHS. We're very proud of it, and there are a large number of people who are very concerned about, if you like, privatisation of the NHS, or privatisation of the NHS through the back door. And so talking about companies providing services can be quite provocative.
Yeah.
And we probably need to use languages of partnership, and make it very clear that this is the NHS working with companies and not companies taking over bits of the NHS. And we also need to be able to talk about how this is different from the sort of PFI offer, where possibly some of the aspirations we had of PFI weren't very realistic anyway, because PFI worked when the contractor could entrain third-party revenue streams and things into their activities. It's very hard to do that in a hospital, and so actually maybe PFI was a flawed tool in the first place in that space, and it might take quite a lot to overcome those kind of residual attitudes and concerns. I agree.
Thank you, Graham. So if I may, folks, I'll turn to the room and ask if there's anybody got any questions in the room for Graham.
Hi, thanks. So it's kind of an extension of what we'd already been talking about, but one of the issues I think we're particularly interested in around contracting and revenue models. And you mentioned right at the end of your speech that there was a diabetes initiative where they'd actually already contracted and delivered against that. I wondered if you had any insight as to what that revenue model actually looked like, just to give us an understanding of how appetites might be changing within the health service, where they might be thinking differently about how they can contract.
I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm afraid I don't know the detail of the contracting mechanism, or what what payment was based on. And it could, you could conceivably do the same thing, just based on delivering the numbers, numbers of people, but you wouldn't get the benefits of the kind of iterative self-improvement that the business would naturally do if it was incentivized to do so. And I don't honestly know whether in the example I gave, there is a clever contracting mechanism that looks at progression of disease in individuals, or whether it's just a treat X number of people. So it's not something that I can really reassure you about, whether some commissioners do have their head around this already and are moving forward, unfortunately.
Thank you, Graham. We have a second question in the room.
Yes, Adrian Botham again from Service Park Consulting. And I suppose it's not so much a question, it's a bit of a comment and a little bit of a question, I guess. I've got a lot of experience in the defence sector, where we've done a lot of contracting for availability type of models, a lot of servitization over the last sort of 20 to 30 years. And I've not done that much in NHS, which is why it's a bit of a comment, a bit of a question, really. But I do know they've got an awful lot of expensive equipment in the NHS, perhaps not as expensive as some of the warfighting machinery they have in the defence sector, I appreciate. But I'm just wondering, in terms of culture change and contracting models, I don't know if they've got sort of contracting for availability in the NHS, but they could learn from their friends in the defence side of the business about how to do that in an effective way for uptime of equipment. I can imagine if expensive equipment goes down, it's really expensive. People's lives are at risk in the NHS in a similar way to, I'm supposed to, in the defence sector. So there's a bit of emotional sort of buy-in there in a way, a reason to get it right, have the right kind of equipment, have it available, and do that in a cost-effective way. Transfer that risk on to the sort of equipment manufacturer in the way they've done it in the defence sector, perhaps. And then once they get those kind of models in place, and the culture around that in the way that Graham's been talking about, maybe then that could sort of read across into other type of sectors. And sort of listening to the previous keynote as well, it was interesting. I had a question there around the leading indicators of health, because I've not heard much myself or read much around what are the primary root causes of the ill health and the dementia and the Alzheimer's that we get as we get older. Until we understand what the leading indicators are, the things to track, then you can't really address the root causes when you're younger. Everyone thinks it's eating properly, it's exercises, but how do you track those kind of things easily? Using, sort of watches and other kind of devices, wearable technology, if you like.
Yeah. So
I've got a few thoughts there, but not perhaps a question. I don't know if that helps you too.
Maybe the first part, Graham, if this is okay, but the question, if I may, was are there examples of equipment in the health service which is being offered on an uptime contract on a rather than the complete outcome-based contract, an uptime or availability contract?
I think some of the big ticket items like scanners and some of things like laser treatment tools, things like that. The really big ticket items that are multi-million pound a throw. I think some of those are now and move because the NHS has longer term kind of relationships with the businesses or individual trusts have longer term relationships with the businesses that they procure that sort of equipment from, because it comes with particular operating methods, bolt-on tools, all those sorts of things that come with it. I think in those spaces it's closer to the kind of model that the questioner mentioned, and that I was involved with the MOD of sort of availability contracting to make sure that the contractor is responsible for making sure that that piece of kit not only is sitting there on the floor, but it's actually working and available to treat patients when it's needed. So I think we have got some spaces like that. I think there's more to go. I think we can come down the cost ladder a bit. The NHS is not good at knowing what kit it's got and where that kit is, because there's so much of it. It is adopting processes like Lean, which help to reduce the waste and reduce the number of extra bits of kit there are floating about. And once you start to do that, you have to be more efficient in managing that kit's availability, knowing where the kit is, knowing who's going to use it when. And I think there are opportunities there for, you know, asset management type organizations to wrap services, or for the providers of the kit to wrap asset management type services around it, on much cheaper kit than the sort of big ticket items that we're talking about.
Thank you, Graham. Sorry, I was just receiving my instructions. I'm just the front man here. We have one or two questions actually online, but if I may, what we'll do, we will, because of the time constraints of the program, we'll hold those for the moment, and perhaps we can forward those to Graham. Graham, thank you very much for taking time this morning to speak to us and to give us your insights into some of the opportunities and challenges. So very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We're going to move now, ladies and gentlemen, from Ireland to Australia, using the wonderful capability of digital. And we're going to hear about how organisations now are starting to respond, or are responding to some of these challenges and opportunities that we've heard about to do with ageing society. And I'm delighted to introduce our first response, which is from Ben Wilson at Schneider Electric. And Ben, can you hear me okay?
I certainly can, Tim. Can you hear me?
We can both see and hear you. Thank you for joining us, and please take it away.
No worries. I just realized just one thing. Are you seeing the logo in reverse on the screen? No, I think, okay, that's better. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on. My name is Ben Wilson. I come from lockdown Sydney. I apologize for the state of my hair. It's week, I think it's week 15 or 16 now in Australia. So I just have one little thing to complete. I just realized it looks like, there we go, we've got it the right way around now. Fantastic. So thank you for having me here from lockdown Sydney again. My name is Ben Wilson. I work for a company called Schneider Electric, and I'm presenting our outcomes-based offer, EcoStruxure Outcomes, Secure Power as a Service. So I am the Services Marketing and Offer Manager for Australia for the Secure Power line of products. I've been at Schneider Electric for about 3 years now, and my background is in the trades. I've completed some time in the sales world, then I've shifted over into marketing. So don't hesitate to lurk me on LinkedIn, or send me an email if you do have a question after this event. So the operative word of our offer is outcomes. And so what do we mean by outcomes? We see that our customers are split with two types of orientations. So They're split with the asset orientation or the outcomes orientation. So I'll go over the outcomes orientation in the next slide. So within the health space, by default, prior to Schneider Electric releasing this new and innovative offer, our customers in this space were locked to the asset orientation. And so under the asset orientation, the reality is for customers who own their assets under the asset orientation is that by design, by default, they have to divide their focus between their patients and their facility. And so really under the asset orientation, which is required to solve an immediate business problem or to create value for our customers in their space, they had to buy or lease the asset. And so under this arrangement, they had to figure out, okay, what is the best way to procure, to acquire the box that solves my business problem, that's critical to my operations? What's the best way to procure? Who do I speak to within my organization to acquire the asset? How much money do I have to spend? What do I need to do to get my hands on that box? Once they've got the asset, they then need to figure out, okay, I've got the box, how do I integrate that into my business, my operation, my enterprise? Who installs it? Who puts that in the right place within my premises? How do I extract the maximum amount of value for that asset that I own within my operation? Once it's installed and hopefully it's running well, they need to hire or find the right people that they trust to maintain that asset over its entire life cycle. Much like a car or any type of machine, critical infrastructure requires maintenance, requires the right people with the right type of know-how to do the right type of maintenance at the right time. For most of our customers, they rely on Schneider Electric hardware to provide some form of uptime or protection. Once it's running, it's really it's somebody's responsibility within the customer's organization to monitor that asset from start of life, the middle of that life, and all the way to end of life. And so for some of the legacy hardware that we've got, that we used to sell, it used to be that somebody would have to walk past that machine once a day, twice a day, and listen. Is it beeping? Is the LED red or is it green? And then if something goes wrong, what do they have to do? Who do they have to call out in order to go and actually find that fix? Who's responsible for that action to ensure that the customer does not experience downtime? And within this industry segment, downtime is fatal. And at the end of that asset's life, and fingers crossed, there haven't been any problems, it's been maintained correctly, depending on the asset type. So for the assets that I'll be talking about over the next couple of slides, you might get 10 or 12 years out of it before you need to replace that asset. You start this process all over again. And as you can see from this little graph here, you've got revenue generating activities on one side and initiatives to enhance care on the other. And so in between that, there are a number of actions that are required for a customer to complete by default under the asset orientation. They have to raise the purchase order, find the right people, maintain the box. They have to monitor that asset and then replace it at end of life. There are lots of things that under the asset orientation are required by the owner of that asset to be done in order to receive that outcome. And often we find that our customers are not experts in this type of equipment at all. They're experts in looking after patients, in providing care. They're not experts, they're not electrical engineers, they're not experts in this field. We are. And so as we shift over, I mentioned that the operative word for our offer is outcomes. And so that's what we're providing to our customers. So when our customers are outcomes oriented, which we find the whole world is transitioning towards to, they tend to say, I want to be focused on my core business activities, to innovate, to find growth, especially within the healthcare industry, to enhance the care that I provide to my clients. So enhanced care is a form, it's a competitive moat. It keeps regulators away, keeps competition away, and that's really a core part of our customers' operation of their business. So a key example here is radiology as a service. And so there are providers out there that give people within the healthcare space exactly what they need in an outcomes orientation, because people in the health space, our customers, are really only interested in the outcome that they receive from that component provider. So with radiology as a service, our customers within this space pay on a pay per scan basis. They're really only interested in the outcome that they can receive from the provider, and it's up to that. It's a responsibility of the provider to deliver the outcomes that people within the healthcare space are looking to acquire. And so, as you see, if you look around the outside of that radiology as a service, that medical imaging machine, you see that when that is a core part of our customers' operations, they can now focus on a number of things. So reducing cost to serve, working capital efficiencies by not owning that asset, digital transformation initiatives, and again, enhancing patient care. Enhancement of patient care is vital for our customers in this space. They're experts in providing care, in assisting their clients, not in the technology that enables them to provide that care. And so we see in this space, we have a term, critical but not core. And so businesses, our customers in this space, when they move to an outcomes orientation, they see that the things that they've shifted towards an outcomes orientation are critical to their business, but not a core part of their business, because the core part of their business, again, is to provide care to their patients. And so what is Schneider Electric doing in this space? So our offer, EcoStruxure Outcomes, Secure Power as a Service, is really a new and innovative way for our customers to access the secure power experience that they are looking for their operations, for the enterprise or for their business. And so secure power within Schneider Electric covers the following products: single phase UPS or uninterruptible power supplies, 3-phase UPS, critical cooling, and micro data centers without the IT equipment inside. And so all of this hardware that you see here, these boxes, if you work in the medical space, you probably might know that this equipment keeps electrical equipment that's downstream of the UPS protected from electrical spikes or interruptions from power. And so these assets are critical for people within the healthcare space, but obviously not a core part of your business, of your operation. And so how does this work? So you, as the customer, you might specify the secure power outcome that you require, or we might go to your site to understand, okay, what capacity and runtime and redundancy requirements do you have within the health space? And then we'll create a bespoke solution that's individual for your needs. It's fully managed, owned, and digitally enabled by default. And it's an adaptable solution that allows Schneider Electric to provide the outcome that you're looking for, without the requirement to own anything. So similar to the utility experience, this is the alignment of cost to usage without any hidden fees. And this offer allows you, as the previous owner of the equipment, to transition your fleet of owned assets gradually over time to an EcoStruxure Outcomes model, which will really allow you to maximize your existing investment. There's no requirement to go out and swap everything out from the first day. we can help you manage your assets over time and manage them from, I suppose, mid to life to end of life, and then transition them over to a Schneider Electric owned solution. Okay, so I mentioned previously that our customers, by default, were locked to the asset orientation prior to this offer coming out. And again, our customers procured via the asset orientation in order to acquire the secure power experience. And so for our customers, especially in the health space, it's peace of mind for their business, it's availability. And often we find that there are dedicated UPSs, these uninterruptible power supplies, directly upstream of many operating tables or critical processes within the healthcare space. And I mentioned that our customers used to procure these assets in a buy, own, and operate manner. And so there's a number of key points to really remember when you are the owner and you operate the assets that you own. The first point being, it's a significant upfront capital investment. So in Australia here, a typical mid-sized UPS that might be used within the healthcare space here would be $90,000 to $150,000 paid upfront prior to the actual use of that asset. That's a lot of money that needs to be spent upfront that potentially could be used in other parts of your operations, of your business, in order to create superior value. When we go to site, we typically see that the vast majority of the UPSs that are installed on the customer site are over-provisioned. And this means that the vast majority of the time, it seems like our customers are buying, they're purchasing more than what they actually require for their operations. So when we've gone to site, we've seen some UPSs running at 20 to 30% capacity, which for some older generation UPSs might be 80 to 85% efficiency. And what that means is that potentially 20% of the electricity running through that UPS is turning into heat. And so an over-provisioned UPS, over-provisioned equipment is not efficient on energy. It's not efficient on capital. So that third point there, when a customer decides to go to buy, own, and operate that piece of equipment, there's an operational commitment. There are strings attached. As the owner of that piece of equipment, our customers are fully responsible for that piece of gear that's on their site. And even though they might have a service contract with Schneider Electric or some of the third party, they're still at risk. So if any issues arise, it's up to the customer to identify, find the right person, and to manage that solution from cradle to grave, from start of life to end of life. And our offer allows our customers to be able to transition their fleet of own assets over time to an outcomes-based model. And the key points are with our offer is that there's no upfront capital investment. So similar to, in contrast to the model of buy, own, and operate, there's no capex required in order to start utilizing the experience of secure power as a service. Our customers that move to this model pay literally for what they use, and I'll cover the billing models in the next slide. And because it's owned by Schneider Electric, it's not owned by the customer, it's not a lease, it's fully owned and managed by Schneider Electric. It's our responsibility to provide the outcome that our customers are paying for. We own all parts of the solution lifecycle. It's our responsibility. And here I present to you the 5 pillars of value for our offer. So the first pillar of value I mentioned earlier, no upfront capital investment. And we find that, or our customers tell us, that they deem payments to us in a fully OPEX manner. So there aren't any assets that sit on our customers' balance sheets. because we, Schneider Electric, we own those assets and we provide the outcome to the customer. It's our responsibility to do that on their behalf. The second pillar, pay-per-use economics, as commonly seen in IT. So our customers, when they transition to secure power as a service, they literally pay for what they use. And there are two billing models for now. So there's metered UPS load per kilowatt hour. So very similar to like a utility bill, where there's a pricing table and there's set pricing based on how many kilowatt hours our customers consume, or a simple agreed fee per deployed unit. So a certain size UPS or certain size cooling unit or micro data center in a certain region will have a set price. Again, it's very easy to understand, very simple pricing table, and it allows our customers to project their potential monthly costs based on their actual usage, which avoids any potential for bill shock, which is really important for all of our customers. The third pillar, proactive lifecycle management, or full lifecycle management by Schneider Electric. I mentioned earlier that Schneider Electric own all parts of the solution. It's our responsibility to provide the outcome to the customer. So all parts of the UPS, the battery systems, subsystems, cooling, micro data center, all of that hardware we own and manage, and we take care of everything from cradle to cradle or cradle to grave. There are no unplanned costs from installation, maintenance, monitoring, repairs, all the way to end of life. And there's a key point here that our customers seem to really resonate with these days, especially as we crawl out of this COVID-induced malaise. Circular economy. So this offer is circular economy by default. When we own the hardware, it's our responsibility to take it away at the end of life or at the end of the contract. And the current stats that I have from the procurement team last year was that 99% of all the returned obsolete product was diverted from landfill. So 99% of all the equipment that we were given back, that was either Schneider Electric or other brand, was put into somebody else's supply chain. It was diverted from landfill. And so this is a really key point. Our customers can participate in the circular economy by moving over to an outcomes-based model. There's no requirement to be an expert in circular economy or recycling or understanding how that works as a customer, when they can look to Schneider Electric to provide those outcomes for them. And we find that some of our customers are now wanting to go to market to highlight some of these green credentials that they're now participating in the circular economy by shifting to our outcomes-based model. The fourth pillar is agile provisioning, or really rapidly adjust capacity to your business's needs. So all of the hardware solutions that we provide, that we put out onto the customer's site, is digitally enabled by default. So we actively monitor the load trends and the environment, and we understand exactly what's going on with that asset and the environment that it's operating in. Most of our hardware solutions are modular. And so what we're able to do is, by monitoring what's going on at the customer's site, when that asset starts to operate slightly out of the original design envelope, we can go back to that customer and inform them that we might need to upgrade that hardware unit. And we're able to do that. We're able to upgrade or downgrade the capacity really quickly without the typical procurement cycles. I'm not too sure what it's like in Europe, but in Australia, we find that the typical procurement cycle has gone from 2 or 3 weeks to 2 or 3 months. It takes longer and longer for anybody within healthcare or really any industry to get a CapEx procurement request through, and for Schneider Electric to receive a purchase order. And that really slows down our customers within the space, and our customers that have transitioned to an outcomes-based model are able to really acquire the agile provisioning of these solutions. So the fifth pillar is maximize efficiency from day one. So because we right-size the hardware solution for our customers' actual requirements, it's extremely efficient on energy. I mentioned earlier that our customers who owned older generation UPSs are stuck with UPSs that are at 80–85% efficiency and running at a lower capacity. When our customers move to an outcomes-based model, we're able to provide them exactly what they need, and that's really efficient on energy, and it's efficient on capital. And so linking all of these 5 pillars together, or 5 parts of the pie, we have class-leading digital tools. So we have a number of digital tool suites under the name brand EcoStructure, and we also have the right type of experts in their field, in the country, in the region, and in the global level to allow us to servitize our traditionally quite transactional CapEx-based offers. Okay, so what we're providing to our customers is an outcome, and that outcome is secure power as a service. I need to just repeat again, this is not a leasing model. It's not a financing model. We're providing the customers the secure power, the UPS, the critical cooling, the micro data center requirements that they actually need as a service. We're Schneider Electric only asset. And so double clicking in on that offer, we see here that there are a number of elements that allow us to do that, to provide that outcome to our customers. And so the first of which is the customer success manager. So the CSM, their role, their job is to ensure that the customer is as happy with that solution that we provide to them as possible. And it's their job to hold the customer's hand to ensure that they access and that they can actually derive the right amount of value from the solution that we provide to them. We provide to our customer usage metering and monthly billing, again, depending on the type of solution that we provide to the customer. We do have different billing models. I mentioned earlier that Schneider Electric own the hardware, and it's our responsibility to select that hardware and provide that hardware to our customers, and to manage that hardware's life cycle from start of life, mid to all the way to end of life, and to ensure that that's disposed of in an environmentally friendly way. If you look on the left and the right, there's the runbook and the digital tools, and they are the capstones for this offer. Without the runbook and the digital tools, linking all of these individual pieces together, we wouldn't be able to provide secure power as a service. These are the artifacts and the tools that allow us to servitize our offer.
Ben,
so just imagine.
Ben, we're a little tight for time.
Oh, okay, sorry.
No, it's okay. You've got some wonderful stuff. Perhaps if you could just draw it to a conclusion, we might just get a chance for one quick question.
Absolutely. Okay, just let me see. I was going to go and cover the case study, but that's okay. Would it be possible to cover the case study, Tim?
Say again, sorry?
Oh, sorry, would it be possible to cover the case study?
We've only got a few minutes left, unfortunately, before we have to move into the next presentation. I'm quite mindful that your case study, there's a lot of, it's a very rich case study, there's a lot of interesting content in there. So maybe what we could do is, if we draw to a conclusion now, we can pick up about the case study at a slightly later time, a later event.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay.
So apologies for that. It's just that we have quite a tight schedule. If I may, is there any questions for Ben in the room before we move on? We've got, if I may, I'll just take the question. Just one question for you, Ben, if I can. Then we'll just have to move on. No, sorry, would you have to do this from here? Forgive us. We just getting the microphone into the right place. So, sorry, name and organisation, please. Yeah.
Hi Ben, my name is Matthias Anderson from the pump company Grundfos. My question goes along the line about customer data. So you say you own the whole solution, and I could imagine within hospitals, like a lot of data that would be coming through your solutions are sensitive regarding the patients, etc. So just wondering, like your journey with your customers in terms of overcoming their potential fears, in terms of you having to interface their data. How have you been dealing with that?
Okay, so really the data that we're talking about here is machine data. So data that pertains to electrical load, that pertains to electrical data. So in terms of we don't have any exposure to patient data, so there aren't any issues in that regard.
So did that answer the question? Do you want to give? Sorry,
It's we are on the utility side of things in terms of water infrastructure often, and so what we experience is that there's a hesitation to move into like outcome-based services or even just cloud services, because our customers fear that their data will be exposed through our solutions. And so it's just if you had any considerations with that. But if you're not interfacing with the sensitive data for the client, then I mean, then that's probably not the same case here.
Did you get that okay?
So I might just make a very quick comment. So there are times where our customers may not want us to use their network, and that's fine. We can create our own Schneider Electric network that sends data to the cloud using our own network, so it's segregated from the customer's side, and there's no worries that about any form of cybersecurity issues that may arise.
That's great. Ben, I'd like to say again, thank you for making the time today to speak to us, and apologies for having to draw your presentation to perhaps a premature conclusion. It is very much appreciated, though. Thank you, and look forward to again speaking in the near future. Thanks.
Thank you.
So we're going to move on to our fourth presentation, our last one before tea break, before coffee. It's based upon this idea of how a manufacturer, how a technology business can respond to some of these challenges. So I've got my pleasure in inviting Eva to join me. And Eva, if I may, I shall leave it to yourself to introduce yourself and the work you do.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I'm Eva Tranovic. I'm the Managing Director of Dignio. Dignio are manufacturers of software as a medical device. And I will take you through a quick presentation to give you some idea of what it is that we do, and how servitization is of interest to us, and how we look to increase our revenues by utilizing this model of delivering business to our customers. Our customers are the NHS. We heard a little bit in the previous talk about the changes which current procurement frameworks are undergoing to encourage novel ways of purchasing services for our patients and ultimately for ourselves, the taxpayers. Healthy aging is a challenge globally, and it is acute and it's chronic. It's not going to go away. It will only get worse as more and more people grow older, and the ambition is to keep them healthy. It's about not just providing people with more years of living, but also good quality and healthy years of life when they can be active. So we describe ourselves as a blend of methodology and technology. We in 2021, technology incredibly easy to manufacture, cobble a few bits together, it will work. The question is how well will it work? And as I touched upon, aging populations are a reality the world over. The longer people live, the more complex their needs become. They develop a multitude of long-term conditions, which feed into complications, which reduce their capability to function to their full capacity. Funding and staffing are a challenge for all healthcare system and social care system worldwide. There's variable digital maturity across organizations providing health and social care, and sustainability is also an issue. NHS contributes to a carbon footprint of Britain, and the ambition is to ensure that the healthcare delivery does not create patients by creating pollution. And health inequalities are also a reality. And that's where servitization model is a really good option, because it focuses on providing services from manufacturers, from businesses, in such a way that there's an incentive to ensure that there's a longevity of contract, there's a good quality of service delivery, and there isn't a constant churn of suppliers and customers. So is innovation always the answer? We all hear all about how innovation will fix everything. And I just hate seeing wasteful innovation. And wasteful innovation is where people try to reinvent cogs where there is already a whole wheel. And we see it time and time again with our beloved NHS, that we see healthcare organizations creating tech solutions and business delivery models very locally, not interoperable with anywhere else, not aligned with what's going on globally and nationally. So it happens. So we focused on trying to create a solution that is more comprehensive, that can meet a multitude of needs, and then can be like a one-stop shop for multiple requirements for delivering health and social care. So our software is a connected care platform. It's a comprehensive platform with multitude of tools, including communications and medical devices for measuring vital signs. So things like your blood pressure, your temperature, how well you're breathing, and how much you exercise, etc., etc. We've used Bluetooth integration for our devices to make sure that when they are given out to an individual, they don't have to do any pairing. There is no barrier for them to actually be able to use the solution. And we focus on collecting and processing data. It's a sensitive category of data. It's people's medical details. So we adhere to very strict standards in terms of how we do what we do. We focus on building care around the person, and that is what makes us different than a lot of solutions on the market. That for us, a person has a multitude of needs, and a tech provided to them needs to be able to evolve and travel with them across those changing needs. And we focus on increasing self-care and compliance from the patients, including medication compliance. And we're a multi-award winning company, which we very transparent, and we're very pleased when external judges review what we have achieved for the NHS and think, yes, there's something really good going on here. So this is the actual product. So you have Dignia Connected Care, which is the connected care platform in the middle. You have clinicians or other care professionals on one end, and individuals or healthcare professionals at the other end. The software, as I mentioned, is a software as medical device, which means at the moment we are class 1, we're aiming for class 2A. And that basically means that we have to manufacture our product to certain standards, and we will be verified and held accountable that those standards are met. And we offer a wide range of different e-health solutions in one comprehensive platform. And we can be used for telemedicine, remote patient monitoring, medication compliance, reporting, self-management. And everyone would have seen the headlines about how technology will replace doctors, etc., etc. We have no such ambitions. Our product is that to support the clinicians to optimize their workload, to make sure that they have time to attend to those who need attention, and not spend time on drudgery of routine work, phoning someone up, or checking their notes. Oh, how are you? I'm stable, fine. Bye-bye. It still takes money, it still costs. It's a staff member on the phone. So we replace that by risk stratifying the caseload for them. And we focus on interoperability and scalability and portability of our solution. These are some of the standards that I was referring to. And again, when it comes to healthcare domain products, those standards should really be enforced. And one of the issues that popped up in the previous conversation about outcomes and whether outcomes are written in contracts, the least the buyers can do is to enforce that a certain baseline common standards are requested and required of all manufacturers. So you don't unleash a software product onto patients or social care recipients unless you're absolutely confident that the data is secure, that the technology does what it says on the box, and it will be used. One of the banes of technology products being purchased by healthcare and social care providers is that it's bought in the traditional way. They buy it, they bring it, and then very often it's not used, it's just sitting there in the box. But there's no accountability, there's no monitoring afterwards, whether you're actually achieving the benefits that you have paid for. And that's why I strongly believe that the servitized model will really offer a lot of protection to the buyer, actually. Yes, there's a concern that this building of collaborations and enduring relationships with the buyer can reduce competition somewhat. But ultimately, if the suppliers are held accountable, and they're held accountable by the servitized model of delivery, then that will create a better outcome for all of us and better outcomes from the contract. And we focused on supporting the whole care journey because people's lives change, their needs change. So supporting people from when they are fully independent, then they receive maybe some home-based care, then they move on to residential care. And our focus is to make sure that the tools we give them will follow them throughout their changing needs and through the whole care journey. And because we have that capability, we can develop that collaborative relationship with the healthcare social care providers, where we give them a tool which will evolve with the patient's needs. So they don't have to bring in another supplier because now they've moved on to residential care, or now they've developed diabetes, and now they've developed cardiovascular complications. It can all stay within one solution. And because we know we have a track record and evidence that we have really high compliance rates from the patients, they like our technology because we created it with them. We're not afraid of the outcomes-based, value-based contracts. We'd be so happy if that became the norm in the UK today. Alas, it is not yet. So our products focus on being able to support people wherever they are, whatever is happening to them. When they need this extra support and feeling of connected care, the clinician can be wherever and they can still provide it. And what piqued our interest in servitization? Our software was already part of it was sold as software as service. We're a cloud-based solution. But there were other aspects of it which we're offering to the clients which sort of went under the radar, and the value of those additional offers was not really visible to the clients. And through working with the SME program with Aston Business School, we've discovered that actually we can enrich our conversation or pivot our conversation a little bit differently with the clients to make them aware just how much they are getting from us in terms of value for money. That it's not just the surface price, and the traditional procurement practices look at pounds and pennies. And you think you're comparing like for like and nobody pays attention to details. But I think with a servitized model, you move the mindset away to the life cycle cost of the deployment, the service, the tech support, and evaluate that introducing this kind of product into your, this kind of service into your practices can offer. So as I mentioned, we're very happy with value-based pricing. We haven't seen outcomes or gains written into contracts yet. What we have seen is that in the initial conversations, there is a question, and with the healthcare products, there's always a question, how will that impact on the workforce? What are the outcomes for the patients? What are other outcomes, other gains from the deployment? And we believe that converting to servitized model of delivery of tech products will ensure continuous quality of service through deployment. It's not going to be, I bought the software today, the supply goes away, and that's the end of their problem, and I'm left with something that my clinicians, my patients don't want to use. And the other aspect is the green aspect. And traditionally, we know that the focus on the sort of, I'm a manufacturer, I sold my bit of kit, it's now sitting with the trust, it's no longer my problem unless I have the service contract as well to make sure it works for X number of years or whichever it is. Maybe I need to provide some consumables. What happens to that bit of kit at the end was not often so much of a consideration, but I think with the switch to thinking about the impact and the NHS net zero ambitions, we're reaching a stage where there's a lot more consideration given to what is the impact of what we're doing and how we deliver care on the environment. And solutions such as Dignios can really offer a lot of reduction in the care miles, reduction in ambulance journeys. You don't need to hold a vast hospital estate to service the patients you need. And also the personal protective equipment. We sort of think what made headlines is all those single-use masks making their way into the oceans and waterways. But what is not so much visible is the entire carbon footprint of manufacturing those things, delivering them, and then distributing them. So when you start looking at the entire supply chain of delivering certain activities necessary for healthcare and social care delivery, that's when we can start thinking differently. And again, that's where servitized models pivot thinking away from one event, purchase, I've got something in my hands, away to what's going to happen to it over its entire life cycle, and puts the onus on the manufacturers and suppliers to make sure that what they're bringing in, they actually know what will happen to it at the end of its life. And the other benefit is because it's pay as use, assets are not sitting just in case, they're actually being utilized. And what are barriers to technology uptake, to improve those various outcomes for the patients, to reduce the carbon footprint? Number one, procurement practices and funding models and incentives in order to enable the servitized model to be the accepted common practice for how manufacturers can supply to healthcare and social care systems. Procurement practices and frameworks need to change. There is lack of clear guidance for risk-averse buyers, and people will get rewarded for bringing in innovation, but they'll get punished a lot more if things don't work out. So there's a little bit of an issue with the culture and mindset. There's lacks of certainty over budgets because NHS is undergoing various reforms. There's variable digital maturity. I've been to an A&E recently, and they were running around with bits of paper, and the handover was a clinician with a bit of paper talking to another colleague, or another clinician sitting down and entering things from bits of paper onto the screen at a central desktop station in 2021 in Britain. I found it a little bit shocking because that's where human errors come into it, and also things can go wrong. And there's variable organizational maturity. So we're supposed to have integrated care systems. They are at various levels of making things happen locally. And there's organizational culture in that some organizations are very risk averse. And it's almost, we operate within healthcare social care, where you have a lot of very positive, motivated, fantastic individuals. So it's almost, I put the packet of sweets there, because it's almost like coming into a landscape which is really a little bit complicated. And there's lots of fantastic, positive individuals within it. But collectively, the landscape makes it really difficult for manufacturers to sell into. And the mitigation is creating guides for the buyers, providing service as a hybrid model or pure servitized service, de-risking the project for the buyer and be clear about the benefits, and collaborate with care providers, academics, care recipients, other suppliers. And collaboration is the key word. And interestingly enough, all the recent funding streams that have been released by NHSX, they all have the word collaborate within them. There's a recognition that to really deliver successfully, the manufacturer cannot just sell and go away and then hope that they'll forget by the time the contract needs renewing. They need to stay there. They need to make sure that what they brought in actually works. And take-home message, servitize how you provide access to your product. You need to monitor the whole deployment cycle and impact and be creative. It's amazing when you start thinking, and we're so grateful for getting the external eyes on how we do things, because when you talk to people with a fresh mindset, it's amazing how you discover the value add that you could offer to your clients. And the cliche is to collaborate to innovate well, and talk to Aston Business School about servitization. And I would encourage all manufacturers to take that offer up. We changed the way we price our products, and it makes the conversations much easier. And I'm pleased to say that we have landed the first contract based on the servitized model, where we just charge a license fee, essentially. And the other knock-on effect is that we provide software, which we have total control over. This is our in-house manufacturing. And then we provide the third-party medical devices. We don't manufacture those. Do you know the number of times the clients tell us, Digno blood pressure machine failed? So recognizing that whether it's our branded or we just resellers, we still end up being bashed with a stick. So we've decided we'll try to get the carrot out of the situation and sort of, de-risk the project, predictable costs to the client, de-risking, nothing to install, nothing to scrap, nothing to put in, nothing to take away. Steady pricing and assurance of quality of service. So that's us. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Now, I didn't ask Eva to put that last bullet point up, but I'm going to leave it up. That was great. Thank you very much. Very interesting. So, any questions from in the room, please? If you may, I'll take the one on the right-hand side first, and then yourself.
Hi there. So you mentioned that
Sorry,
working with Aston...
Name and organisation.
Oh, sorry, Paul Lucas from IFS.
Okay.
So we're also a software provider. so I'm interested in this. So you mentioned right at the end there that working with Aston Business School changed the way that you price your products. Do you mean the model, i.e. the sort of leasing SaaS type model for software, or do you mean that it helped you pitch where that price should be in terms of level?
A little bit of both. So traditionally, the way we would deploy, we would charge setup fees, we'd charge training fees, we'd do an outright sell of the third-party devices. And then we would charge the license fee for the software, which included the element of full tech support, which other suppliers would partial out and charge for. We didn't, but it just didn't stick in the customer's mind. They're getting the full package. And when you look at what you get under the price tag, you get a lot more than you get from the competition, but it wasn't so explicitly worded. So then we've pivoted away from the outright purchase of the devices, because also there's a situation where the NHS has purchased a stockpile, for example, of pulse oximeters, and then they purchased a stockpile of blood pressure machines, which are not Bluetooth enabled. They're out there in the community, thousands of those units. So we don't want to be in a situation where that somehow stops us because someone thinks I have to buy your hardware devices and I already have 10,000 on my patch. Why do I want to buy this? I just want the software, etc., etc. So we've reworked both the model, but that also by default led to different pricing levels. But they seem to be a lot more explicit and easier for our buyers or potential buyers to understand what they're paying for.
Thank you.
Adrian Botham, Service Park Consulting. I thought it was a very interesting presentation, even, and I suppose I've got a question, because I often find that servitization changes the marketplace that you think you're in, and manufacturers are often slow to catch on to this. And so listening to your presentation, there could be several different buyers, several different users, several different marketplaces. I'm intrigued as to where your first sale is, who's the first buyer, and how do you see your marketplace for this? So is it insurance companies that you think you're selling to? Is it patients? Is it hospitals? Is it, who is it that you're selling to, do you think? And who do you think the biggest market is, perhaps?
Yes, so what I didn't mention is we sell to healthcare providers. So our buyers would be the NHS broadly taken, whatever sits underneath it in terms of the different structures as they are evolving nowadays. Social care commissioners, local authorities. We don't sell directly to customers. That is not, because our software requires the element of the clinical care. And that clinical care needs to be accountable, it needs to be provided by someone. So other type of customer are providers of out-of-hours services. So for example, you have organizations, one of our flagship customers is a social enterprise up north, who provide out-of-hours, out-of-hospital services. And they utilize our software and the devices, they utilize our offer to power their care provision. And that enables them at the moment to run 9 virtual wards. And as new cohorts of patients come onto their books, as they secure new contracts, they just expand using the same software. So for them, the cost of our tech is predictable. So then when they secure new contracts, they can price up fairly easily in terms of, how much do they need to offer to the customer as, this is what the cost of the service will be. So a variety of customers, but ultimately they will be the commissioners of healthcare or social care within the UK. When you look at other footprints we operate globally, we, obviously in the States, the tariffs are much different. It's a much simpler landscape in terms of reimbursement. And we also operate in China. In there, we haven't secured a commercial project yet. We run research projects in collaboration with various research institutions and hospitals. And Norway is like the NHS. It's a publicly funded healthcare system.
Any last questions in the room, ladies and gentlemen? Okay. Well, I think, therefore, that it could be time for a coffee break. So, Ava, thank you very much. Very interesting presentation. So we're going to take a short break, and after the break, we're going to return to start to explore this this transformation process, this process that we go through as a business starts to innovate its capabilities to deliver these services. So back in 15 minutes, and I think we have a video to show whilst we're away of another one of the businesses that we work with, actually showing their work in the health service too. So I believe that's the case, Ben? Yeah. So coffee and back in 50 minutes, folks.
Technology is a Birmingham-based manufacturer of ultraviolet light equipment for a wide range of industrial and medical applications. We understand that our customers want help to optimize their processes whilst minimizing their risk, particularly around the process control and the safety aspects. So what we intend to do is continue to develop our UV Centre of Excellence by creating more e-learning material and developing further our measurement technology and consultancy services. And in the future, this will all be on a subscription basis. The light bulb moment for me, and I need to take you all the way back to 2008. We had the financial crisis, but on top of that, we also had disruptive LED technology coming in from low-cost economies, which were really beginning to commoditize what was effectively a niche and specialist market for us. So we realized we needed to reinvent ourselves, we had to differentiate, and we had to find new ways of creating value for our customers. Personal favorite is the new one, the services-led business model blueprint. And I love that one because it pulls everything together really nicely. But I can't really say that one's contributed the most because it's so new. So in terms of contribution, that would have to be the visioning tools. It made me value myself and the team a lot more. And what I mean by that is it makes you want to make sure that you get paid for the value that you're creating for the customer. And secondly, it really emphasizes that you need to co-produce value, both internally with the team, but externally with your customers, but also your network partners. And this is just so important, as I'm sure you know, to ensure alignment of motivations and the perception of value.